JourneyTEAM. We've been around for almost 30 years. We're white glove implementation Microsoft partners, so we work across a stack of all the tools, right? We've been doing it for quite a while. I think one thing to kind of give us credibility is 90% of our clients and customers are referenceable, as in they're willing to testify, be a referral for us because of the job we do. Right, over the past 5 years, we've been doing over 1,300 projects, right? Biz apps or business applications with Dynamics, ERP, CRM is a big part of what we do. We have plenty of accolades, right, and awards giving us credibility. We were in a white inner circle last year, right? Top 1% of partners in the services we provide for licensing as well as implementation. One thing that allows us to be as good as we are is we have everything in-house, right? Our headquarters is out here in Salt Lake City with satellite locations, right? And maybe in Texas, Tennessee, and California. But we work across the stack. We have Clay and Jesse who are part of our ERP team. We have people part of the CRM, a team dedicated to cloud security, SharePoint, Power Apps, Power BI, as well as Power Automation. So on multiple projects, there could be multiple team members all collaborating for the client and making sure everything's implemented correctly, right? So I don't want to steal Clay and Jesse's thunder, but I do want to turn the time over to them to introduce themselves and give themselves credibility. But again, keep an eye out for chat if you have any questions or concerns. And then from there, we'd be able to answer any questions. And then also 2 drawings if you fill out the survey. Appreciate it. Thank you.
I'm just going to let you continue to share if that's okay, Nathan.
That's
my
fine.
whole computer decided to crash and I have Teams up and that's it. So nothing should go wrong from here. All right. Go ahead and jump over to. Yep. So quick introductions. My name is Jesse Olson. I've been with JourneyTEAM about 4 years now. I've been involved in this conference ever since. I kind of joined on with the team. My background is heavy on finance. My previous role was a controller. We actually brought in a JourneyTEAM at my previous employer to do an implementation for us and kind of fell in love with what they do in the process. And so I immediately jumped over. So I've been doing it ever since and happy to do it.
Clay Fox, as you can see there, ERP Senior Functional Consultant. Where Jesse's the finance, my main focus is supply chain, but as we'll get into, have worked a lot with the Shopify and some of the e-commerce stuff as well. Have been working in Microsoft products in the stack for 25 years with Dynamics Nav and then Business Central for the last 12 or 13. And so have been with JourneyTEAM for just over a year. So happy to be here.
Okay. So the topic we're going to kind of do with this session is really kind of exploring extensions for Business Central. I want to kind of start at the very top level. I'm not sure if everyone on the call is already using Business Central and they're aware of, kind of what we say when we say extensions. It's basically an add-on package, a software of some sort that enhances the capabilities of Business Central. And so there's plenty of partners out there that, they've created their own products that kind of bolt into Business Central. They have to go through certain vetting and processing to be able to be available on what we call the App Store. And it's the same concept as, your phone. You can go to the App Store on your phone, download apps. It puts in, different software, different things, but still using the core product of the phone. And so that's kind of the concept of extensions. And what we wanted to do is kind of call out some of the, main ones we use and some that are pretty integral within just the Microsoft process. So we've got 2 of them from Continia. Continia is one of our preferred partners. They've got a document capture solution that will kind of help with some AP automation. And then they've also got an expense management solution to help with, reimbursable expenses or corporate credit cards. We'll also spend some time and talk about the Shopify integration. That is something that Microsoft actually brought into their software not too recently. It used to be a third-party plugin, and then Microsoft worked with that company and kind of brought in all of their software into the core product. So that one's kind of an extension, but kind of not an extension anymore. And then the last two we're going to talk about is, things that we've actually developed here at JourneyTEAM. These have come from, feedback from each of our clients on different things, that they needed to enhance the system. And we've tried to package these up into, somewhat of a resellable product that we could use for everyone. All right, let's jump over to the next slide. And diving into the Continia document capture. So what this is it's really to make the paperless process feasible. It's got a concept of, it uses an OCR tool. OCR stands for optical character recognition. And so what it will essentially do is you will get invoices that you can send into like an email address. Once the emails go in, it will create templates, and it really kind of helps with the data entry process for your team. They've got different, levels with the software. You may have a simplistic AP process, and all we need to do is, regular expense invoices. We're not doing any type of inventory. We're not matching those to purchase orders. And so we could just use what we call their essential package that is kind of the bare minimum. They also have, advanced capture. And so that would be if we needed their tool to actually go through and read the line level detail. So if the whole invoice isn't coded to a corresponding GL account just based off of the vendor itself, and we do need to read those line item details, that would be their advanced capture module. Kind of another service they offer is the order matching. This would be to accomplish the three-way matching process that many people do kind of in a more manual approach using Core BC. And then they have their own document approval portal. And so this kind of expands on some of the capabilities of what Core Business Central workflows can do. And so, if you're running into shortfalls with the core BC workflows, this may be a software, just based off of their document approval enhancements. Go ahead, jump over to the next screen to kind of show, what this looks like in action. And so this would be just, a normal page inside Business Central. You can see off to the right, there's a copy of the invoice, and then off to the left, you've got a bunch of different fields. And so what the system's going to do when you first import in the invoice, it's going to go through and try to find and extract that data for you. So it uses a concept of, like an anchor point. So, you can see it's highlighted invoice number, and it's got, kind of that orangish box around it. So what that's telling the system is, hey, anytime I get an invoice from this vendor, if you find the words invoice number, I want you to look, just right below it and extract that number for processing on the invoice. So with each, vendor invoice, you can be very specific on which fields you want it to grab, maybe which fields it shouldn't grab, completely customizable. So if maybe some vendors you need to read line item details, maybe other vendors, you want to pull in like a salesperson code. So you got a lot of flexibility there, as you set up each of these templates for each of your vendors. So that's kind of a high level overview on the document capture solution. If you guys have any other questions or that, or want to see a demo of it, definitely just let us know. Okay, let's jump over. Yes, the expense management. So this is probably one of the most common extensions I've seen, is really this expense management tool. So I actually went down to a conference, the Summit conference that Microsoft put on, and I would say probably about 6 out of every 10 vendors was focused on, either some type of AP automation like we just talked about, or, some type of credit card solution. So they've got a solution. They're pretty similar to the other ones you've seen in the market. This would be a competitor of Concur or Expensify, one of those processors. So just like you saw with the document capture, they've got, different modules that you can select. You've got some different functionality that, maybe you just want to do this for reimbursable employee expenses. So you can set it up in that function. You've also got capabilities of importing like a credit card feed. And so if you've got corporate credit cards, we can definitely, set up an integration with those. It does mileage and per diem. Mileage is actually integrated with Google Maps. So you've got some flexibility there. And then if we do want to push out, different per diems for our employees. Go ahead and jump over to the next one. Okay. So this is kind of giving you a visualization. They've got a web application. So if people want to be on the computer submitting expenses, you can see off to the right, they just go to this web page, classify. You've got some different fields. That's all customizable. We can completely design out the user interface. And then off to the left, you've got pretty much the same exact thing, just in a mobile application. So if you've got users that travel in and not in front of a computer, you can also use, just the mobile app. Now it's Clay's turn.
Excellent. So first, didn't want to assume, probably most of you are familiar with Shopify, but this Shopify connector is really, what you'd think of as kind of an integration. It's going to tie their platform together with your ERP, your Business Central system. So, for the most part, Shopify's big. It's been around a while. I'm not sure. I think it's probably the largest, the most common one that's out there. Similar to like a WordPress where you can, put your theme on it. It's really intended so that you don't have to hire a web designer, a web expert to get your e-commerce platform going. Let's jump to the next slide. So like I said, I think it's probably one of the most popular e-commerce platforms out there. I'm sure that drove, some of Microsoft's decision with this. There's really kind of three main components for it. You have orders, you have products, and you have customers. They also do payment gateways, so that they can handle your credit card processing. They do have a fulfillment piece that I'll kind of get into as we go, as well as they have an app store. So there's a lot of people building extensions for them, and I threw kind of their standard pricing on there. So as you can see, it's pretty affordable. So the thought being, if you're a small to medium business, you want to be able to, take orders of, have an e-commerce site. It's a pretty simple software as a service, and a pretty inexpensive way to get out there on the internet and start having transactions. The next slide. So yeah, so like Jesse hit on a little bit, there was a company called Skapta that's out of Europe, that had an extension called Skaptify. It's been out, I think, I'm not sure exactly when they started, but I know several years. We have some customers that have been using it for multiple years. And so Microsoft made the decision to purchase them, and as Jesse said, kind of roll that in. And so it's technically looks and feels just like it's part of the package. It's getting deployed now, I think, over the last 2 updates. So for I think 6 to 9 months, it's now people are noticing it because you have that little Shopify menu up at the top there. And really the goal is that it's to, if you think about having out on the web all of my products, my orders, and my customers, that would take a whole set of management along with my ERP. So the goal is that this transfers that information back and forth so that it really reduces the overhead that you would need to have a Shopify site or a Shopify store or shop, as well as Business Central. So the kind of the mechanics of it, as a customer goes and hits your Shopify shop, they make a purchase, that order is created, that is pulled into Business Central. They keep it in kind of a separate table, so all of your orders that are on Shopify are replicated into Business Central. The two kind of things that can be typically, they're going to pay with a credit card, and essentially you're going to ship them whatever they bought. You can utilize Shopify as a point of sale. So, I have people that use it at a trade show, or somebody comes into your office. In essence, you could essentially fulfill it there, take the payment, and still be able to replicate that into Business Central instead of having to be, manually, enter that, transcribe that into your system later. So once that's in there, based on if it's a item to be shipped or point of sale, it'll generate a sales order, which would mean in your Business Central, hey, I need to ship this out to this customer, or a sales invoice if it's already been fulfilled, if it's just a point of sale transaction. And so then you would go in Business Central, you would execute the sales order just like you would typically do today. You're going to pack it, ship it, mark, I shipped it via UPS or USPS, my tracking number, and then post shipment on that. Then once that's done, once that's been shipped, the interface then takes that information, puts that back out to the Shopify store, updates the carrier and the tracking number, and then does the notification for you, so that probably what you're used to doing other internet sales, you're going to get your text message or your email that says, hey, your stuff is shipped, here's the tracking number, thank you for your business, and ultimately then archives that that order. And yeah, pretty much then it's a fulfilled order, and it comes off of your radar. And I will jump back there, just so you can kind of see in that screenshot. In that Shopify menu, there's, I guess, 6 things there. So there's shops, there's a customer list, there's product lists, there's orders. You can do gift cards or credits. It can show you all of the transactions, all of the payment, all of the essentially the payment activity, somebody's credit card failed, things like that, as well as the payouts. Okay. Thank you, Nathan. And this is just kind of a diagram just to kind of help kind of conceptualize it. So if you think of, I have this web store, Business Central's pulling in your orders. There's also another piece of it that would sync your inventory. So you can choose whether to turn it on or off, but typically you're going to keep inventory in Shopify. That way, if customer A buys the last of that unit, customer B sees, oh, there's no more. I don't want my customer to make an order and then have to tell them that I don't have that stock. So there is another piece of this that we'll talk about, that it will sync your inventory. So I may be selling stuff in Business Central, both via my web store as well as directly. So the web store would know what I sold there, but it wouldn't know what I'm selling in Business Central. And so that way it can essentially sync and do a little adjustment that said, hey, 2 got sold, so decrement the inventory total in my web store by 2. And then that last part on the bottom is, again, the fulfillment piece. As that transaction is processed in Business Central, it goes back and essentially fulfills it, does the notification, and closes it out on the web store. Next one there, Nathan. So, for the most part, between what Scaptify had and what Shopify had, it's really identical, other than a little bit on the configuration. It's really simple. Once you have your URL, mystuff.com, and once you have that URL, you're going to enter it in. It's just going to walk you through the process. There's a little app that gets installed on the Shopify side, but it's pretty much, I click it, I log into my Shopify site, and it's done. There's a couple things with, usually you're going to have to obviously link what my items are in Shopify with what my items are in Business Central. So in your products in Shopify, you're going to have what they call a SKU ID. And for the most part, usually I say to make that the same as your item code, whatever your item ID is in Business Central. There is about 3 or 4 different options you can do with that, but that's the most common way. That way, when I sell an item on the web store, it's really easy for this integration to say, oh, that's this item when I make your sales order for you. But it's going to essentially do a mapping that says, these are all my items in Shopify. This is what they relate to in Business Central. You can synchronize customers. I so far have not seen anybody really do this, at least in mass. One thing that you can do in Shopify as well, a lot of people will have what they would call a B2C, so where I sell to customers direct, as well as a B2B store. So maybe you don't sell to the public, but you sell to other businesses, and maybe it's simpler for them to do the transactions via the web store, you know, or I have other businesses I sell to. So you could have multiple stores. So you can certainly interface one BC tenant with multiple Shopify stores. But in some cases where you do B2B, you would actually sync those customers so that you would track all of that activity back to a customer. What I see typically for most people that sell to the public, I don't want to sell to 1,000 different people on my web store and keep 1,000 unique customer records in Business Central. So usually they'll have a default or a generic, you know, Shopify customer that then all of those unique people essentially get tracked back to that one Shopify customer. But you could have one per store too, if that worked. But it does have the ability to synchronize customers based on emails, I think phone numbers, a couple different things. And the next slide we'll see what that kind of looks like. Jump back though, we'll come to that after that. And then you can synchronize, like I said, the item setup. So you could essentially start an item in Business Central and push it to Shopify. You know, and usually that way you make sure they're in sync. So I would define an item and then I have a process to, maybe if you think of it, push it to Shopify. You can go the other way too. You can start an item in Shopify and have it come back into Business Central and actually create or at least start an item in Business Central. Usually, I haven't seen a lot of people do that because there's typically different information that you need to track in each of them. In Business Central, you're going to be more about the costs, you know, how you're going to handle it financially, and less about kind of how you would maybe think of describing it out to the internet. In Shopify, it's all about keywords. What are those texts? You know, what's my customer experience as far as, you know, enticing them to buy this or making sure they're buying the exact item they want. So I haven't seen a lot of that synchronization because usually there's two different sets of information that I have to kind of maintain. And Shopify, similar to Business Central, has, you know, the ability to bulk upload. You can have an Excel list to kind of provision those. So usually it's just a matter of using the same data, making sure my item and SKUs are the same to interface those. We talked about the inventory quantities, that those get synchronized back and forth. Another one that's common is, you know, typically you're going to have some shipping, you know, either the customer is going to pay some money for shipping or maybe it's free shipping, but obviously I need to record where my costs of my shipping are going to go. So you can essentially establish what GL account you want your shipping charges to go to. I talked about a little bit, you can see transaction details, payments and payouts. Those all get downloaded into Business Central as well. I did want to make a note. So whatever that order number is in Shopify, that will come over. It will be on your sales orders and your sales invoices. So you have that kind of that linkage between the two. And then another one that I've seen a lot of people kind of miss is Job Queue. And some of you may or may not be aware of Job Queue, but that's Business Central's kind of task manager, if you think of from a Windows standpoint, but my kind of back end that will run jobs, either code units or reports. So everything for the Shopify connector, any of these kind of processes are all set up to run in the job queue. So typically, you know, pulling orders from Shopify, syncing inventory, updating those shipments back, the payouts, we would set up in the job queue so that those just run automatically. So instead of somebody having to go out there and sort of manually pull to see what's happening, typically I set it up on an hourly basis where every hour it's going to go out and say, hey, do I have any new orders? You know, and I usually set that up kind of during shipping hours, you know, so maybe 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. or, you know, you can certainly set it up 24 hours if you wanted, but it'll just go out there and automatically download and actually create your sales orders. That way for your shipping group, a sales order just pops up, you know, every hour, a couple of them will trickle in, and then they can fulfill them. And then the next hour it would go out and update those customers on what had been shipped. So this final slide here, you want to flip it one more there, Nathan? Yep. This is essentially the setup card. And there is a couple different kind of back-end pieces that have the, you obviously need to tie your locations together in case you have multiple locations in your web store. They need to relate to your locations in Business Central, again, so that that inventory would stay in sync. Shipment methods, did they pick next day air, 2-day, standard? That way, when your sales order, you can tell what what kind of shipping that they purchased, as well as payment methods. You can take PayPal, you can have Shopify do it, how you want that to be reflected in your system. But essentially, this is what you would set up for each of your shops. You're going to have that URL, you're going to give it a code. You can have different currencies. In that item product synchronization, that's where you would set up how you would want your items to sync. And a lot of those, I think I may have missed it there, but you can have the images sync. So if you put images out in your web store, you can have those come into Business Central. But there's a lot of different, item templates, how you want it to push or pull that information. In the customer part, same kind of thing, how you would want, if you do want customers to synchronize, what that default customer number would be, information there. And then very at the bottom, it's a little bit hard to see, but that's where you would set, those shipping charge, the GL account. If you have a gift card account, they have a tip one there. I still haven't had anybody that actually has a tip one, but also in that lower right-hand corner is, setting it so it auto creates the sales orders, and then also kind of how it handles the tax. I think I got one more left here. One more. Yeah, so just a couple caveats here with it that I have found, mostly for people that have been using maybe Shopify for a long time and are kind of new to Business Central and kind of how to tie them together. The idea is that Business Central is your inventory system. So once you have those guys syncing, what's going to reflect out in Shopify is what Business Central says is your inventory. So if you have a purchase order that's supposed to come in today or a transfer, it's going to automatically assume that that inventory is available, and it would reflect that out on the web store. And so I've had some people are like, oh, why is Shopify saying that I have more? Well, it's because you have a transfer order that's dated, that's coming in today. And so just making sure you understand that, and that you're managing that inventory in Business Central, and Shopify is just a reflection of that. And as well as that, the intent is that you're going to pack and ship, that you're going to do that shipping process in Business Central. I've had some people that have been using Shopify to kind of use their little fulfillment system. And if you do that, you can do it, but you're missing out on some of the functionality it's there, and it gets a little bit complicated to make that work. So ideally, you would go and your shipping people would be using either Business Central directly or maybe some other kind of pack and ship extension on that side of it. A few things that I think are still kind of out there. If you have a return or a credit, it doesn't currently have any support for that. So if you are going to cancel something or you need to credit somebody, you would still have to go out to Shopify to do that part of it. It does integrate with pack and ship, but there's a couple caveats that we've made a couple little fixes for, that some pack and ship people have to have a state abbreviation where Shopify likes to bring in the name. Also, sometimes they put the package tracking information in not a standard position. I've had some issues sometimes with the way people do taxes. Ideally, Business Central is set up the same way as your Shopify store, as well as then on some of the reconciliation, it will show you the information, but you still have to kind of go and apply it. There isn't any sort of auto reconcile on that part, which is another kind of chore with some of this, especially if you have a lot of volume, that still isn't addressed. But that is the Shopify connector. If you have Business Central, it's out there as part of it, but certainly, we're always available here to provide expertise and help if you need it. Back to you, Jesse.
Back to me in the studio.
Mhm.
All right. The last two we're going to talk about, these are two that we've actually had requests for. We built internally. These are not things that you would necessarily find out on the app source at this point. I think at some point we will have these, available, but right now it's just on any projects we do. These are two of the available apps that we can install. So the first one we are calling basically our page extender. And this is enhancing the personalization functions inside Business Central. So typically Microsoft went in and they defined, here's the data set that's most relevant to, the page or the table that you're looking at. And so they give you a list of fields and options that you can, basically interact with to show and hide what you want to see and what you don't want to see. And so what we have found is there's been quite a few situations where, we want to go in and add a field on our home screen, on our personalization that isn't there by default. And so we built a page extender app, which we are continuing to grow this. As more requests come in, we're constantly, building in new pages and tables that are expanded. But you can see here, just kind of a representation of it. Both screens have, I pulled up the intercompany general journal on both of them and just looked at the different amount fields that were able to be added to the screen. So you can see on kind of the picture that's on top, that's core BC. So there's only 4 separate fields you could add that contain the word amount. But on the screen behind it, this is the environment where we've got this page extender added. There it's showing, a whole list that you can scroll through and add. So, the basic highlight of it is if you're running into constraints, as you're trying to personalize your screens, if you're building screens for your users, or maybe they're trying to modify their own, this would definitely expand those capabilities. And if you're a current user of it and you're running into still screens that aren't showing you the right data, definitely let us know and we can get them added to the actual logic. Okay, go ahead and jump to the next one. So this is one that's actually pretty fresh. We had 3 clients that were kind of looking for something similar at the time. And so we kind of looked out in the market. We couldn't see anything that was built out there. And so what we're really looking for is, we run into a lot of clients that have the concept where you'll have a vendor expense come in on the purchasing side. You have to pay it to the vendor, so everything's square there. But that's also, should be billable back to a different customer. Anyone that's doing like service work, if there's billable expenses that then need to flow, straight to the customer, this allows you to do that without having to, track that. How we've kind of done this in the past is with the use of dimensions. And so what we used to have to do is create dimensions for all of our customers. And then if you have, a purchasing expense that you want to flag as billable to a customer, you would assign it that customer's dimension value. So then at the end of the month, you would go run a report to see, here's my total billable expenses by each customer. And then that would be the data set used to create the invoices on the sales side. So obviously that's a lot more work than kind of what we're seeing with this tool. And so what it does is we just added some different fields and functionality to the purchasing side. So in the invoice details, we basically got a spot where we can put in who the customer is, if it's a billable transaction, and then if we want this added to an invoice that already exists. So if you leave that field blank, it would just create a new sales invoice for the billable expense. If you populated it, it would then go just add. So still trying to, kind of make improvements and enhancements to this. And so, if you've got any recommendations, we're definitely all for it. Just trying to make it easiest for everyone.